Hello and welcome to this edition of City Hall Insider. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and today we're going to take a look at the planning department today. Jennifer Carloni is the Director of City Planning. I want to make sure I say that right. Michael McCarthy is the Assistant City Planner. Thank you both for coming in, Jen and Mike.
Thanks for having us.
Lots going on with your department. One of the busiest departments in the city. Not that they're all not busy, but you've got so much going on. I think it's good, though, to give an overview of what the department does for the people that are at home that don't interact with you. What is it that the department does?
Okay, so we're primarily the land use is what we look at primarily, but that means we are looking at planning for now, the future, looking at our history and how development happens across the city. And what that means is we look at the regulations, we put regulations in place, we amend them for what we want to see develop physically in buildings and structures across the city. And we oversee 5 boards and commissions, so the Planning Board, the Zoning Board, Historic Commission, we have the Technical Assistance, the Community Preservation Committee, and the Redevelopment Authority until recently. We've been assisting them as well.
So that's a lot right there, too. For those that might not know what those are, I mean, the zoning board is different than the planning board. I know both meetings are on TV. Tell us a little bit about what the zoning board does versus the planning board.
Sure. So the zoning board, they review applications for projects, like somebody wants to put on a deck or they want to do a driveway, but it doesn't meet our requirements. And so they have to come to the board and say what's unique about their property, why it's a hardship for them to be able to meet the requirements of our zoning. And the board looks at those applications. There's certain criteria that they need to meet, and if they meet that criteria, then they're allowed to build that structure in a way that's outside of our regulations. But if they don't meet that criteria, then they're not allowed. But that's kind of where that wiggle room is, because if we understand, like we put regulations, but sometimes there is obviously opportunities where somebody might have something that works, but it doesn't meet our regs. So that's when that's an opportunity for them to be able to,
and I know I asked you
those gray areas.
I know I asked you this off camera, but a good thing too is sort of the what comes first. I know a lot of people will say, do I need to go to zoning first or do I need to go to planning first for a particular project? But as you said, it's not that simple.
No.
Because some things might already be in place. Right. That you would have to go to one particular board first.
Absolutely, yes. So a lot of things right now, we just changed some of our regulations, so a lot less things need to go to the planning board for a site plan review. So you're pretty much going to the planning board if you trigger site plan review, and that's where you have to have engineered drawings and show us what you're doing for your project in its entirety. So that they're looking at where a building is located on a site, they're looking at where the driveway entrances are, they're looking at the height of the building in relation to our regulations, but also in relation to the neighborhood. View sheds, all kinds of different things, traffic impacts of a project, parking, pedestrian access, all of those type of things. Whereas the zoning board's really looking at projects that didn't meet part of our requirements. And so you're only going to the zoning board if there's something on your project that doesn't necessarily meet our requirements. Or in the cases where you need a special permit, some special permits are required by the planning board, some by city council, and some by the zoning board, and those are for different uses based on how our regulations are positioned.
And people might be watching too. This month, the Community Preservation Committee had hearings recently, lots of them, or 3 of them.
Yep.
So it's a great time for you to come on and just explain that aspect of the department too.
Sure. So again, they're a little bit different. They're in our department, but they actually, Jess Bailey is their independent administrator. We provide technical assistance to them, but she really is their administrator. But how that process works is they have applications by entities. They review those applications, and they have to fall in different buckets. So there's different buckets: historic preservation, housing, open space and recreation. And if those projects fall in those buckets based on the plan that's been adopted by the CPC and the city, they're able to allocate a certain percentage of those funds to different types of projects. And so they look at those projects, they evaluate those projects, and ultimately they make a recommendation on the projects that come in to City Council, and then City Council votes on the the total amounts that are awarded.
Right. Mike, it's going to be amazing because you guys are dealing with so many different entities out there, just the regular person and organizations and developers and what have you. You really run the gamut in that department with the types of people and organizations that you're working with.
Yeah, and I think that one of the important things, Jim, is that the planning department is an open department to the public. So if people have questions about anything they see on a board agenda or something they read about in the newspaper, like the New Bedford for Haven Bridge replacement or a zoning update that we're working on, our department has a very thorough website, and we always have staff available in the office that are knowledgeable about what's going on, and people can call or come into the counter. We have physical copies of all the material that's available online, and that's before the board. So if someone wants to come and review something ahead of a meeting so that they can comment or just feel informed about what's going on, we welcome them into the office in City Hall.
And you and I have talked over the years too. You're finally fully staffed as far as I know.
Yep.
You've been working on that for a long time, but you do have a full complement of staff to deal. It must be nice actually, because you're able to do more things.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and the breadth of experience and expertise in our office is really wonderful. We have historic preservation, we have landscape architecture, we've got policy, we're the policy kind of side of it, and then just engagement. We've got some of our staff have really done extensive engagement in the community. So really, we've got this great cohort of a team that really works well together and really understands our community and really can do the work that we need to do.
One thing too is you're talking about the product, and you kind of touched upon it with the people coming in. A lot of this stuff takes time. Mm-hmm. It's not something chances are you're not going to walk in and get whatever you need and start something right away. The whole point is there's a lot of different people involved before anybody really starts to do something.
Right.
Talk a little bit about that too, that I don't think people grasp that. Instant gratification is what they're looking for, but it's not that simple.
Yeah, I think a lot of what happens is by the time something gets before the board or even into our hands for review, it usually starts in the building department. So our building commissioner is also our zoning commissioner and zoning enforcement officer. So he reviews all building permits that come before him, and he checks to make sure that they meet our requirements, or if they pass a threshold to go for site plan review before the planning board. He'll prepare like a zoning conformance package, and it summarizes for the person who submitted the building permit what sort of, we call it relief, that they need before our board. So they might need a variance for their front yard setback if they can't meet the 20 feet or whatever it is for their district, and they might be doing a project that's large enough to go before the planning board for site plan review. So then, armed with that packet, they can come down to our office and we can set them up with the right applications and the right staff members to help guide them through that process. Then they need to prepare their application packet. That could be another month. Then they get before the board. Hopefully they can make their case in one meeting, but occasionally the boards will request more information. So they might have to come back to the next, we only meet once monthly. They'll have to come back to the next month's meeting and work out those issues with the board and demonstrate to them that they've heard their feedback and incorporated it into their plan, or provide justification on why they're unable to do that.
And the more complex the project, the more time it's going to take for something, because as you said, the board may have questions that they want answers to.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And before that, I think even before they get to our boards, there's a whole process that they go through with their design teams, especially if it's a big project. You've got architects, you've got engineers, you've got designers, and the client, obviously, who owns the property or who's opening the business. They're trying to meet their needs and their pro forma or the amount of money that they have to spend on the project. So they try to figure all that out before they even get to us. And then then they go through the board, and there's that revision process. And then after that, then they finalize their plans. So once they go to our boards, they're only at a certain percentage of design, then they can go to their construction documents. So that takes a period of time for them to go get their building permits, and then you'll see it under construction, a couple months later.
You guys have to interact with a lot of other departments as well, which again, people think that departments sort of are separate, they're all entity, but you're one particular department. You talk about the building department, but inspectional department. You deal with a lot of other departments in the city depending on what the project is.
Oh, absolutely, because we're, our primary purpose is permitting, right? That's one of our main roles is making sure we're permitting projects, but also is that larger scale projects, right? So we're involved in the infrastructure. So Mike alluded to, we've got Fairhaven Bridge, we have I-195 reconstruction, there's South Coast Rail. So we are in constant communication between our Department of Public Infrastructure, our, if we're looking at Parks and Rec. So there's a constant interface between all the different departments, even our facilities department, because we have staff on, like we talked in the beginning, our staff is really broad in their skill set. We have one with landscaping. He's done some landscape design for the library, for example. So really it's working amongst the departments, communicating, making sure we know what's happening. Even on the infrastructure side, particularly with roadways, say, because you have projects that are coming through, and if there's a new roadway going in, we need to know, if they can cut into the roadway before
Right.
the roadway gets paved,
Right, yeah.
because they need to put a pipe in. So there's stuff like that where we really need to communicate, and we do, and it's a really an effective system I think the city has, and we're lucky to have a great engineering team at the city who keeps us informed and vice versa.
Well, it must, in a sense, it must be fascinating for you guys too. No day's the same. I mean, I would assume that you do have those days where this thing has just been put on your plate and like it's got to be dealt with now. And there's a lot of big projects going on.
Oh yeah.
So that does, make it challenging. But I'm sure, when things are finished, there's probably no better feeling for you guys than to see a finished project.
Yeah. And we always joke that like projects, right? So like by the time the public sees it, so 195 is going to be starting construction this year, right? So it's out to bid right now for the design build. But we've been working, myself and a couple of my team members and our Department of Public Infrastructure with the state DOT or Department of Transportation for over 2 years now on that project. So it's almost in our rearview mirror. For me, it's almost like I forget it, but it's just starting for the public. And so for us, it's like you're saying, it takes a long time for these projects to happen. But by the time they get to the public, we've already reviewed them for so long that there's a lot that goes into it.
So once a project starts, the shovels are in the ground, equipment's there, you're pretty much done, right? For the most part?
Like our department, for the most part. So like the infrastructure ones, obviously 195, our Department of Public Infrastructure, the engineers are constantly checking. We have a role to make sure that those projects are going through properly and that they're meeting the expectations that were set out in the contract. Like South Coast Rail, like our team and their team have been reviewing, making sure that we mutually see that things are done correctly. So those are like the larger infrastructure. But then in terms of like the smaller scale projects, like a private development, yeah, we watch the construction. And so if there is something wrong, like, we'll get a call from one of our board members saying the stormwater swales or the not hay bales, sandbags. The sandbags are out of place, and there's water. The sediment from the site is going into the sewer system or the drain system, and so we'll call and they say you got to fix that. And so we do monitor, but I think DPI monitors it more, and then when the project's done, we do have to go out and do site visits.
Oh, really?
And we check the site and make sure that it's in conformance with what was approved by the board.
Okay.
So there's a portion where we're not involved, but we're absolutely involved.
Yeah.
And we have had to call applicants back. And,
Really?
Yeah. And they've had to fix things. Yeah.
I think it's like, and throughout the process too, we are a touch point for the development team as they go through it. Once they're on the site and they actually start construction, the plan may be the best laid plan, but once they actually put a shovel in the ground, they discover, oh, we actually need to shift this drive aisle like 20 feet over this way. So then they have to call us, and Jen, as the city planner, makes a determination on whether the change that they're requesting is significant enough that they have to actually go back to the board and have another public hearing.
Oh, really? So you could go back? Wow.
So
Yeah, so it depends on what it is. If it's small things, if they want to change a tree species or something, we can approve that internally. But if they, like you said, if they're changing where the driveway entrance is, that could affect traffic or flow or something. So we need to send that back to the board and have that reviewed.
Let's talk about projects. You touched on a couple of them briefly. The 195 project you started talking about, a huge project,
Absolutely.
which is going to take years to complete. Talk a little bit about what it is, and as you said, it's in the bidding process right now, but it should start relatively soon.
Absolutely. So right now, it is in the bidding process, and so that means they're looking to get a design build contractor. So that contractor will ultimately design the project and build it. But what the state's already done with us is the state has to actually do plans all the way to 100% and design out what can be done there. So we've worked with them, articulated some of our concerns, because originally when this project came through, they wanted, so first of all, 195, we're talking about the elevated viaduct.
I was just saying, where exactly are they looking to work here?
At the Route 18 interchange. So where Route 18 and 195 meet with the elevated, it's called the viaduct, even though there's no water, but that is still a viaduct because it's elevated. So that whole section from
it's kind of before Cogsall, right? When
Yeah,
you
it's
really
right
think about it.
it's it's the Cogswell Street exit, and then all the way to the limits of work I think goes to the Penniman Street exit.
I think it starts there.
Yeah, Penniman to the Cogswell Street exit is the limits of work. And so they're replacing the entire thing. The end result will widen both sides, so you'll have 3 lanes of traffic instead of 2 where there's that pinch point. And then you'll have the ramps, they're redoing the complete ramp. So they're taking down the whole thing. They're going to do it in phases. So they'll move the traffic similar to what you kind of see in Rhode Island. They're going to move the traffic over to one side as they build it, then knock down a piece, and then as they build the new piece, then it'll switch over. So there's a whole flow and a pattern to how they're going to do that. But exactly, they're going to replace that whole thing. And as part of that, their original plan was actually to fill it with, like, basically make like a mound, and we called it the Great Wall. We're not making a Great Wall here. And so that's when the city got involved, and we were really concerned about how it was designed and what its impact would be on our communities, particularly with, you know, how the highway came in the beginning and how that impacts your community. So we wanted to make sure that it was open and people could still pass through there. So a lot of the things that we've done have actually created.
Well, you have people, houses and stuff relatively close to that. Underneath.
Yeah.
You have the school underneath that.
You have the school underneath it, and you've got the school, the skate park, and you have, exactly, you've got these neighborhoods, and there's people who do commute through those areas, and right in the middle you've got the PACA's building there, and that's a public building as well. So you've got all these places that people have to traverse, and you can see the desired paths through there. You can see where people walk, and so looking at how to make it safer, once we met with them and actually decided that we didn't want to fill it, we looked at different ways in how they're going to have it still elevated, and we realized that we actually can have a pathway off of Cogswell Street. So there'll be a multi-use path actually through there, connecting over to the school as well as all the way to Logan Street. So that'll be nice. And there's also, we worked with them on the landscape design, because originally their stormwater had like a big bowl. So almost like those 2 circles would have had a big giant bowl where when it rained it would fill up. And we said, that's unacceptable. We don't want that. We don't want mosquitoes. We don't want this to happen.
Well, it could be a pool.
It could be a pool. Well, maybe we're going swimming, I don't know.
I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
But we didn't want the big wall, you know, the giant wall, and we didn't want these big swimming pools. And so we advocated for them, and exactly, they kind of leveled out the land design in a better way. We worked with them on landscaping and really making it an inviting space for the community to be able to go through that area. And it's beautiful under there. Most people probably haven't gone under there, but if you walk under there, it's actually really nice.
Yeah, it'll be even nicer.
Yeah, it'll be even nicer once it's done.
With a project like that, because you're working with, so 195, so we're talking, you're working with the state. And I would assume that 195 itself is a state project, correct?
Yep.
So you get involved because of underneath 195. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, it comes through our city. And I mean, we're lucky that MassDOT has been very receptive to our requests. I mean, we do have a wonderful Department of Transportation at the state who's really listened to the community, really cares about the input of local residents and the community in their projects. And they're very much understanding of multimodal, and they don't want to have the negative impacts from historically, you know, transportation projects impacted communities, but they're very progressive in how they look at doing transportation projects now. They really want to be a benefit to their communities and not, you know, they want to mitigate as much as they can from the traffic.
Well, a project like that in the bridge, I mean, these are projects that are going to stay there once it's done for a long time. So
absolutely.
You know, in a sense, you've got one shot to get it right.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be done for another 100 years or so, you figure, something
And
like
same
that.
thing with the 195, like they're going to replace the parking lot for the school underneath. The school currently has parking there. As part of that project, that's going to be completely redone. The skate park's going to be redone. So that was great that they were willing to do those pieces, because they didn't have to, you know, in a project like this. But they absolutely, we said we want that. They said we can do it, and they're going to do it. So that's great.
What's and I know, again, it's out to bid right now, and things could change. Best case, what are you looking at as a timeline for that project?
So it should be under construction starting this year, and it'll go through 2029.
And so 2029 is the finish date.
That's
Finish
the-
date.
yeah.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Yeah.
All goes well.
That's the
Yeah.
state. That's the state's
Schedule.
schedule.
Yeah.
So
State schedule. Correct.
can't be held accountable.
You also talked about the New Bedford-Fairhaven Bridge, which has been talked about since, I don't know, caveman days or whatever. It's just people want it fixed or out. Where do we stand with that project right now?
So that project right now has,
You have a deep sigh.
No,
when
no,
you-
no, no.
well, I mean, I think we've all heard it. Like, you know, the mayor says like he wrote his college term paper, I think, on it, right? So it's been on the replacement of it. So
Yeah.
we all know it needs to be replaced. I think that's why everybody has that kind of initial reaction.
yeah.
The bridge. And so that project, just in general, they've officially started the design. So that's good. That's a first major step that we've seen towards that project
And again,
becoming
it's
a reality.
a state project, correct?
It's a state project, right? So it's not our project. But again, we're advocating to be involved. Again, MassDOT's been pretty good with allowing us to be involved in these projects. This one, because it's a historic resource, we do have some additional kind of teeth, I guess, as you could say, or regulations for us to get involved. They do have to do a section 106 review, which is a historic review, and as part of that, they have to have a memorandum of understanding with our Historic Commission, the National Park Service, in the city.
Really? National Park Service too? huh?
Yeah, as well. So that right now we're just about to start that process of figuring out what exactly is going to be in that agreement. Mostly we're going to want a design review over the bridge. But that project right now, so again, it's in the design. By the end of this year, they intend to have 25% design. So that's like a first initial threshold for design, but it is a significant threshold where you really kind of see what the project's going to actually be, and that's where we really can start to say this is what it's going to be and what it's going to look like into the future. And then their timeline, I don't know if they have an exact. They're not.
Not that far
Well,
along.
Not that far along in terms of, because they don't know the full, they don't have the full funding for construction yet. So we do know that the 25% design, and then it'll move on to the other phases of design, and will be evolved all the way through.
It does seem, though, that it's farther along than other, because you've heard about it being replaced or whatever, but it does seem as though it's more certain than it has been in the past that this is on the
absolutely.
radar.
Oh yeah,
And-
they don't do design unless they're going to eventually construct it,
Right.
So that's a great signal when you see that MassDOT has put forward money to design it, because that's the first step to get it on those other. There's the state transportation improvement plan and the regional transportation improvement plan. So you actually have to end, the construction projects all have to end up on that plan, but to get on that plan, you have to have a design. So your initial step is to have those designs. And so that's really great when you see that the state's doing a design, because that means that they're serious and they want to get it onto those funding program plans.
A project like that, though, because I know the port itself has had so much renovation. Does the new bridge have to conform to whatever's going on at the port itself? How does that work?
So they did do an analysis, right, of what's happening in the harbor and what they anticipate into the future. And so that was part of the review initially. And that actually fed into how they decided which bridge type. So that's the first threshold they had to pass was deciding what bridge type. And we had some back and forth, again, because the city and the Port Authority, Gordon Carr, we had a lot of conversations about the bridge type selection, because we were concerned about that. And ultimately, it's going to be a vertical lift bridge, so that means that it has there's two towers on each side, and then the deck of the bridge actually lifts up and then goes down. So that's how.
And for people that don't know, think the train bridge in Bourne,
Yes.
the canal.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a vertical lift
A
bridge.
newer version, but same thing.
Yeah, a newer version.
But the
that's
same thing.
Same type.
Yeah.
Which maybe not our preferred choice, because we don't like having a height limit restriction in the harbor. We don't have one now, but we know that the different types of bridges that were available, the swing bridge, they don't do that anymore. That type, we know from our history, we've seen that break down, we've seen that not work. They don't do those anymore. Then they had a bascule. The bascule had issues because of the height of where the roadway is currently. The whole mechanical pieces would actually be underwater, and they'd be filling up with water at the high tide and sea level rise and all of these things. So really they can't justify putting that much cost into something that they know is going to basically have all the mechanicals underwater in 10, 20 years when it's going to be a 100-year bridge.
And it's going to be tricky too, because you got businesses there, and it's not just like
Yeah.
it's not just like, well, there's
We
one
can,
side.
yeah, it's not like we can just say, oh yeah,
Right, there's one
raise
side and then
roadway.
the other side, and you put the bridge in the middle.
Yeah.
There's different challenges that I guess a lot of bridges wouldn't face.
Right, and the same thing. That's like we would have loved to have the Vascule bridge to open like this, but if you had to bring up the roadway would have to come up 5 feet. Then you have to fix all the driveways,
Right.
and you'd be going 5 feet
lot of
down
businesses
into
there.
those businesses,
Yeah.
and it just we realized that was unrealistic. And then there was one more other type, and that one, it has a lot of failure rate
The Vascule with a
the
weight
weight
above the
counterweight
roadway.
at the top.
So there'd be a big concrete block above the roadway.
Wow.
But that's on a track, and it can frequently get off the track, and then the bridge is stuck up or stuck down, and they got to come bring a
And that's
big
the thing,
crane
is
in.
people are so used to the bridge not working right now. You want something that is going to be reliable.
Right.
Really.
And so while we wouldn't intuitively want this, the tower design, it's the most functional, and we've kind of agreed that that is the best alternative, and it's also the quickest to construct as well. Given all these other concerns, it is also one of the quickest and least impactful for the construction period as well.
We've got a couple minutes left. It's gone by quick. Anything else you want to touch on as far as projects or anything that you think people need to know right now?
I think one thing we just want to talk about, like that we're proud of in our department, is our zoning, right? And so, like, if you want to talk a little bit about why we're doing that and whatnot.
So we, at the end of last year, we wrapped up our comprehensive planning process, and that plan will be out sometime this year once we finalize the edits on it. But one of the immediate outcomes of that was we recognized that there were some zoning changes that needed to take place in the city. We recently submitted and had approved by the council an update to our table of uses, so that modernizes our use table, expands the number of uses, so we can better tune our districts in the city to what we want to see there. We are looking at changing our dimensional requirements, so that will not necessitate people to go before the zoning board as much, because we recognize that a large percentages of our lots in the city that are undeveloped don't meet our requirements today. So we're looking to right size those. And we also recently had approved the Kings Highway Transit Oriented Development District, and that meets our requirements under the state law for MBTA communities. So that allows for denser multifamily construction in the Church Street area around the station and the Kings Highway Plaza, and we've also expanded it to the industrial areas around Mount Pleasant Street across from the airport. So those are three big things that happen, and we'll soon be rolling out our Klasky Common Transit Oriented Development District later this month or next month.
And you have to review these things every so often, correct? Just in general.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, we should. But this is the first major zoning overhaul in decades that we've been working on, and the main reason that we're working on it is to, in alignment with our housing plan that Josh Amaral and the Office of Housing Community Development, they're really trying to unlock potential for housing. So we know that we need to address some of these barriers in our regulations to be able to allow people to develop housing and all different types, and then. Just in general, we wanted to streamline some of our permitting processes. So I think
I did skip over that.
You did skip over that. I was gonna say that we did completely rewrite our site plan review ordinance, and now we have different buckets. And so previously, if you had a 3-family, you had to go to the planning board. You were converting an attic into a 3rd unit. You were before the planning board. You had to get full engineered plans. Now that's just a building permit instead of having to go to the planning board. And then we put like housing for 4 to 6 units. That's an administrative review. 6 or more, you're going to, or 7 or more. 7 or more, you're going to the planning board. So we kind of wanted to right size the review process for applicants as well. And I think that's going to help streamline a lot more of our permitting and make it easier for development to happen. So that exactly those timelines we talked about at the beginning, we're trying to shorten those.
That's going to do it. We are out of time.
All right.
Thank you both for coming in. Jen, Mike from the city's planning department. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of City Hall Insider. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you again soon.